Hi, Frank.
Hey, Russ, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Cool.
Howdy, howdy. It's been a
Howdy.
while.
Thanks a lot for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, no problem. It helps that I already had
Before
it made.
I started, I think I'd just like to introduce you, go through a little introduction and then have you get started at that point, if that works for you.
Sure, would you like me to send you a bio real fast?
I took the one off the national website that where they announced your reappointment as the historian.
Close enough, that'll work fine.
Cool. Well, I'm really excited about this. I just hope it's not just you and me. If it turns out to be that way, then I won't waste your time.
Well, what I was hoping to do with this talk, there's a long story behind it, and I think I've said some of it in email, but I'm probably going to take this talk, now that I have my script, revise the script and turn it actually into an article for Air Power History magazine and try and get it published. Reason being, I've very quickly discovered that CAP has the memory of a goldfish. So just because you did something one year doesn't mean people remember it. And
Sure.
if I get it published in a formal publication, it'll pop out in all these databases, scholarly databases, and so forth. So if anyone
Well,
should use Google and say CAP diversity, discrimination, or whatnot, it'll pop up. And it's
hey, I
just
just
a way
wanted to
to.
let you know that we're recording too, just so you know.
Yeah, I know. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. I don't know how far back they're going to go, but no, that sounds like a great plan. And I can, when you get it published, send me the link. I'll read it. I mean, I'm fascinated, and I ordered those books like you suggested. So the
Yeah,
next time I see you in person, I'll probably ask you to autograph one of those books for me.
I've actually had some units send me the whole cases of books, and I told them, if media mail, you can send the books to me media mail. I will happily sign them all and ship them back.
Cool.
So I've done that for several units actually, and individuals who wanted the books signed. But I opted to publish with Air University Press for several reasons, but predominantly it was to make the book available to the members free of charge. Because if I published with a university press and say it's $25, $30 a book, not that many people are going to be able to spend that money, so to speak, to purchase a book. Oh, there we go.
Hey, Gene.
I know that guy.
And I know that guy and that guy, that guy, that guy.
There you go.
Hey, Frank, nice to see you, buddy.
Hey, Gene, how have you been?
I've been well. I love your Facebook posts, especially your puppy dog and your whole family.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he's napping
yours-
right. He's napping next door. That's why
Is
I
he
have the
really?
headgear on.
Oh God, he is adorable. He is absolutely adorable.
Do you want to borrow him for extended use?
Well,
I can't get anything done. I can't get anything done anymore.
Oh, really?
Parenting, they're a lot of work. They're a lot of work.
I'm sure.
He's a fantastic kid.
You know, I have a three-legged dog as well.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so we adopted her from the ASPCA. Her name is Tiki. She's a Dutch Shepherd mix. I think she's got a pit bull in her, but an absolute sweetheart. And then we also got a golden retriever. So because we didn't want a dog by themselves. Wanted a buddy.
Nelson's from Thailand. He was a street dog in Thailand, and a foundation. He got hit by a vehicle there. A foundation found him and shipped him to a shelter in Fairfax, Virginia. And my wife found him, and he has been a fantastic dog. He's a bit of a goofus and a bit slow at times on the uptake, but he's a very good dog. He's a very good dog, and we've been very fortunate to have him. And the good news is our son is very comfortable with him. So increasingly, our son and the dog have bonded. Previously, you're trying to teach, don't grab the doggy, pet the doggy, but they're doing much better. And I couldn't ask for more.
Is the dog becoming protective?
A little bit. The dog is also, he's slowing down, and we have a split level, so we end up carrying him. He can go down the stairs, but going up the stairs is a bit of a challenge. So we end up carrying the dog out and about now. But when the kid wants to play in the yard, you let the dog go, and they're thick as thieves out there, running around and chasing each other. So it's quite good fun. And the dog certainly kept me going in 2020 because my wife and my son were in Georgia. She was living and working down there, and I was up here in Virginia, so I was constantly driving back and forth all of 2020. So I'd be up here for 3 weeks, go down there for a week, come back up here. 600 miles each way. So it was a long 2020 was a long year for everybody, and it was a exceptionally crazy one for me, to say the least.
Amen to that. My Lord, wow.
Yeah, it's just the hospital, she worked with. They sent her down to Savannah for 2 years, and she was working down. I mean, beautiful place. Savannah's gorgeous. So I didn't complain about visiting Savannah, but it was difficult once the little guy came, because my mother-in-law was living down there with my wife to help with the baby, but it was just very difficult not being able to spend that time with him while he was growing and developing. Now he commutes every day with Dad to his daycare, which is at the National Museum of Natural History. So he and I are train buddies, so to speak. I have him on the metro to and from daycare every day. So that's kind of nice, commuting with him.
So that's where the daycare is, right in the museum?
Yeah. In fact, my museum, when he's 3, they move him over to American history. So he'll literally go to work with Dad, every day, which will be a lot of fun. So
they have a daycare at my agency too, so I think that's just kind of a thing.
Federal, yeah. I got lucky. The Smithsonian daycare people, it's a lottery, and people really want to get into it because they use the museums, so they take the kids in the museums, and show them the exhibits and so forth, and the educational opportunities are tremendous. I just got lucky, and I was paying something like $500 a month just to hold his spot because even during COVID, I said it was too valuable to lose that spot. So I decided to just go ahead and lock it down and ensure we had it when my wife and son moved back up here and when the daycare opened again. And they didn't open until I think it was June of this year. So we were paying we paid almost a full year of daycare without actually going to daycare. But it kept the teachers.
How does it compare to other daycares? Is it relatively similar or higher? Or?
It's about $1,800 a month. So not too well. That's up here. That's pretty reasonable. Well, I should say down here from where you guys are. It's pretty reasonable, all things considered. And we're very happy with the care. I mean, you can see the learning. Every day we pick him up, you can see what he's learning and how he's doing.
That's cool.
Those teachers have more patience than I do, so I defer to them. Okay, well, see, we got a couple more folks here.
Well, I've got 12:15 on my clock, so I'll go ahead and kick us off. I'd like to just start out with introductions, and I'll start. My name is Colonel Rush Chazelle. I'm the West Virginia Wing Diversity Officer. Colonel Egri, would you like to introduce yourself?
Take myself off mute and get the camera back on. Sorry. I'm Colonel Gene Egri. I am the Vice Commander for Mid-Atlantic Region. And as the Vice Commander, I have the responsibility of the diversity and inclusion officers at the region level and working with the Wing diversity inclusion officers. So pleased to be here and looking forward to the presentation.
All right. Mr. Whitlow, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Mr. Whitlow, Captain, Mercer County Composite Squadron, Southern West Virginia, and I am the Deputy Commander for Cadets. And I guess that's about all you need to know.
Great, thanks, Captain. Appreciate that. Mr. Tirado.
Hi, my name is Armando Tirado. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for Martinsburg Composite Squadron. I live in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. And I'm also now the Public Affairs Officer for Wing. So
well, congratulations.
Everybody.
Great, thanks for joining us. Chaplain Carmine.
Good afternoon, sir, and all the folks there. Great to be with you with Morgantown Squadron, about 18 years. And I am the unit chaplain there and also the master CDI instructor. And I got a couple other smaller hats that I wear, but glad to be a part of CAP. That got a great compliment to the 21 years I was in the Air Force, and anxious to learn something else in your new session here this afternoon.
Great, thank you very much. Well, today it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Colonel Frank Blazich. Colonel Blazich is our new and old national historian. He has served as national historian for the last 4 national commanders. He took a little break over the last couple of years where he served as director of the Colonel Louisa S. Morse Center for Civil Air Patrol History, and he was just recently reappointed as national historian by General Felka. Colonel Blazich's history in CAP as the historian prominently include things such as presentation of the Congressional Gold Medal in December 2014 in recognition of the CAP's volunteer service during World War II. I know Colonel Blazich put a lot of work into that to that effort. I was privileged to watch how that happened and how that
he was my boss.
Evolved over the time.
He was my boss for those tuning in.
He also was involved in the 2016 observation of the 75th anniversary. He was did a lot of work on that as well. He established the Morse Center in 2017, and in 2018 he was, I believe, he was the project officer for the 70th anniversary observation of CAP. Colonel Blazich, who lives in Northern Virginia, has received 5 Distinguished Service Awards for his work with the history program. And he has a doctorate in history from Ohio State University, and he's written 2 books. He's the editor of the Bataan Survivor, a POW's account of Japanese captivity in World War II. And he's recently released a book called An Honorable Place in American Air Power, Civil Air Patrol Coastal Operations, 1942 to 1943. And then currently, Colonel Blazich works as a curator at the modern military history at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. So again, Colonel Blazich, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to present to us today, and the time is yours.
Well, Colonel Giselle, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you all here. Can I share the screen so I can show my slides?
Yeah, you should be able to. There's a little, you see the little
share
box
content.
with the arrow on it? You should be able to do that.
Yes, I do. Okay, let's see if we can make this work. Okay, can you all see the screen? Can you see slides? You can go
Yes,
off
sir.
mute and tell me
Yes.
if you guys can see them. Okay, perfect. All right, so for clarity, I use a script. So I'm just going to kind of move along through the script. If I sound a bit stilted, I apologize. It's just the nature of the script. Okay, so with that being said, greetings and hello. I am Colonel Frank Blazich, currently your national historian. This talk was actually first delivered on August 12th at the CAP National Conference. As now, it is titled Till All Are One, CAP and Desegregation, 1941 to 1965. Now, to provide a brief overview, the Civil Air Patrol began as an inclusive organization under federal jurisdiction, but regulations and policies governing membership changed when CAP became an incorporated organization. There was confusion and misunderstanding about policy concerning discrimination. Membership inclusivity and integration in the 1950s and into the early 1960s would thereafter vary by wing and region due to 3 overarching factors: organizational culture, state or local laws or ordinances, as well as unit leadership. Now, these following slides are intentionally text-heavy, and at points they will incorporate the original documents. This is to provide you all with greater information to avoid errors of misinterpretation in meaning or context. Now, I should note this is not a timeline of the civil rights movement, but there are references to specific events which are pertinent to CAP's experience. And lastly, the historical record of Civil Air Patrol regarding diversity is an ongoing research effort, and it is the hope of this presentation that additional information and stories that have been forgotten will be brought back to light and incorporated into the future. Now, on May 20th, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt issues Executive Order 8757, establishing the Office of Civilian Defense. And on June 25th, he will issue another executive order, this one 8802. This order will ban discrimination in the employment of workers in defense industries or the government on the grounds of race, creed, color, or national origin. And on December 1st, when CAP is founded under the Office of Civilian Defense, it is this executive order which will be in place regarding our membership. And then for this reason, actually, 2 days after, on December 3rd, Major Reed Landis, who's working with Gil Rob Wilson to kind of stand CAP up, will actually remove a question about race from CAP's enlistment form just prior to it going to the government printing office. When Administrative Order Number 9 is issued on 8 December 41, and there's the formal establishment order for CAP, and CAP's existence is publicly announced that same evening, there is actually no specific mention as to who is eligible to join. But 10 days later, Major General John F. Curry, CAP's first national commander, will state that there are no restrictions on CAP membership as to race, creed, color, or sex. In his words, only the ability to do the job is the only consideration beyond patriotism. Whoops. Go back here. Now, the exchange, where Curry's words come from, is actually seen here. It begins with a telegram from Cornelius Coffey, seen here on the left. Coffey is the vice president of the National Airmen's Association of America. He is the nation's first African-American certified master aviation mechanic. He's also the owner and operator of the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago. And his wife is someone that cadets are probably learning about, named Willa Brown. Now, as you can see in this telegram, Coffey is informing Curry that the nation's African-American pilots are anxious to serve the country in all branches of the armed forces, and they would also like to serve in CAP under Curry's command. Curry's reply on the right, as you see, is very succinct and positive, basically replying CAP does not discriminate. If you have skills to offer, then we would like to have you in our organization. Reinforcing General Curry's comments, on January 28, 42, the Office of Civilian Defense, so not CAP specific, but the overall Office of Civilian Defense, will issue this press release, which is ostensibly aimed at the nation's licensed female pilots, but which also will quote essentially Curry's telegram of weeks prior, with added emphasis, there will be absolutely no discrimination as to race, creed, color, or sex in the Civil Air Patrol, and each member is to be accepted and assigned duties strictly upon the basis of his or her experience and record of performance. Now, this press release reiterates what has been the policy of CAP from its inception and makes it loud and clear. If you can serve, we'd like to have you. The results of Cornelius Coffey's telegram exchange with General Curry will result in the headline here, where CAP does the impossible in Illinois. On March 20th, 1942, Coffey, and you can see him here on the far left standing, will be sworn in as the commander of the 111th Flight Squadron of the Illinois Wing. You might also notice, third from the right, is his wife, Willa Brown. This is really an amazing, unsung civil rights milestone in American history, not just CAP, but American history. This is the first race and gender integrated uniformed flying squadron in our history. You have African Americans and white Americans, men and women, serving together in uniform for the nation. And this was never covered by national headquarters at all. In fact, the article here comes out of a historic black newspaper. That's why probably no one's ever heard of this before. And what they will accomplish in the Illinois wing here is even more remarkable when you consider that in 1939, Coffey and Brown lobbied, albeit unsuccessfully, to integrate aviation training for the United States Army Air Forces, but they were rebuffed, and the Tuskegee Airmen are going to be segregated and kept separate from white pilot trainees. Brown and Coffey tried to integrate the civilian pilot training program, but they were rebuffed. In fact, the Coffey School of Aeronautics is one of the civilian pilot training program schools, albeit just for African Americans. But it's thanks to Executive Order, jumping ahead here. It's thanks to Executive Order 8802 and the Office of Civilian Defense's implementation of the Executive Order, as well as CAP, that we're able to have a policy in place where you allow inclusivity, integration, and you're going to achieve operational success. So let's talk about this operational success. It can be seen in the 111th Flight Squadron, which will later be redesignated as Squadron 613-6 in about mid-1942. This unit has over 100 members, and even in September of 42, several of them flew a 2,000-mile, 6-state cross-country flight to gain experience for active duty missions. And some of the members of the squadron will participate in the CAP courier service during World War II. In October of 42, they will launch their cadet program, and there are countless young African-American men and women in Illinois wings who will gain their first experience of aviation in this squadron with the Civil Air Patrol. Oh, by the way, Brown and Coffey are also training a number of Tuskegee Airmen who will go on to earn their wings in the U.S. Army Air Forces and end up flying and fighting in the skies over Europe. The legacy of this squadron lives on today in the Cornelius R. Coffey Composite Squadron in Chicago. And this squadron, again, is a fantastic unit that's integrating white and black Americans together in a love of service and in a love of aviation. Many members who will go on to serve in the United States Armed Forces. So post-war, where are we going? On July 1st, 46, as you know, President Truman will sign Public Law 79476. This incorporates CAP and it will authorize the incorporators, and these are essentially all the wing commanders, to complete the organization of CAP by drafting and adopting a constitution and bylaws, as well as regulations and policies. And this is a process that's going to unfold kind of behind the scenes over the next 2 years. So what's transpiring in the Air Force at this time? Well, by April of 1948, when the draft constitutions and bylaws are prepared and they're being sent out to the wing commanders, Air Force Chief of Staff General Carl Spaatz will declare that the Air Force must eliminate segregation among its personnel by the unrestricted use of black personnel in free competition for any duty within the Air Force for which they may qualify. Move on a little more. On May 26, 1948, Truman will sign Public Law 8557. This establishes CAP as a volunteer civilian auxiliary of the United States Air Force. And for those curious, the third mission of emergency services is really grounded in Public Law 8557. So 2 days after we become an auxiliary of the Air Force, CAP will adopt its constitution and bylaws. What you see here are those sections of the original 1948 Constitution and bylaws concerning membership. In Article 7 of the Constitution, which I don't know how legible that is, but I'll read it. It states that all persons on July 1st, 1946, who are members of CAP will automatically become members of the new incorporated CAP. And all those persons who joined between 1 July 46 and 28 May 48 will also become members of CAP under this new constitution and bylaws. So no one's being kicked out. Regarding whom could become a member, if you look to the bylaws, section 2, it notes, quote, any United States citizen interested in promoting the objects and purposes of the Civil Air Patrol shall be eligible for membership in the Civil Air Patrol upon compliance with the requirements for membership. Now, I should note, what are the requirements for membership? They're not explicitly spelled out and they're not articulated. There's also no mention regarding an anti-discrimination policy of any nature within the two documents. So think back: race, creed, color, national origin. 26 July 1948. So again, same year, a couple weeks later, about a month and change later, President Truman will issue Executive Order 9981. This will desegregate the armed forces of the United States. And as mentioned in the executive order, the key section here, quote, there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. They also said this policy shall be put into effect as rapidly as possible. Now, the United States Air Force was the most progressive of the services in integrating its personnel. And in very early 1949, we're talking January and February, the Air Force already begins assigning black officers and airmen anywhere within the service according to their qualifications and the needs of the Air Force. Actually, the last segregated Air Force unit will be deactivated in 1952. This is before any of the other services. Months after all of this, so August 1st, CAP will publish what's known as Civil Air Patrol Manual Volume 1, Book 1 on August 1st. Now, this is not going to include any mention of Executive Order 9981, and this is probably because the books were already at the printers when the executive order was published. But what it does do, however, is that there's a mention of a slight variation on membership requirements. And it will say eligibility was open to citizens of the United States and its territories, both men and women who apply through local units, although they have to have the approval of the unit commander, and that's required for membership. Now, in late August 1948, Fabius Russell, a 2-year member of the Ohio Wing, will write to President Truman. And for clarity, I found this letter researching in President Truman's papers. This is at President Truman's actual presidential library. Russell's a member of the Youngstown Squadron, and he attended encampment at Lockburn Army Air Base in 1947, coincidentally commanded by General Benjamin Davis. and the Tuskegee Airmen essentially are based there. Russell attends. He's there with other Ohio Wing members, white and black. There's no incidents. But when Russell attempts to attend the 1948 encampment at Selfridge Air Base in Michigan Wing, he is denied participation on grounds of his race and told he couldn't even visit the base on Visitors Day. As he notes to President Truman, Russell writes, quote, "I feel that this is more of an injustice than the segregation I run into daily. I want to continue to prepare myself as a member of CAP and well as near as possible. But I do believe I should be permitted to participate in all of the activities that aid this preparation." The White House will reply on September 14th, and it'll state, quote, "The president has a deep personal interest in seeing to it that persons like yourself are not denied an opportunity to join in activities that are shared by other citizens." Now we need a little postscript here. Russell will leave CAP. He will serve honorably in the United States Air Force during the Korean War, actually in intelligence, signals communications. He will go on to earn his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. He also will become the nation's first recorded African-American osteopathic radiologist. Now, the first real CAP policy regarding discrimination, but particularly the eligibility of African Americans to join the organization, will be decided at the 28th to 30 March 1951 meeting of the CAP National Executive Board, chaired by General Spots. Now, during this meeting, Major General Lucas V. Bowe, who's CAP's national commander, recommends that a statement of policy be made regarding the membership eligibility of African Americans to join CAP. But the board, however, will unanimously decide to not impose such a policy. It will not amend the Constitution or bylaws, but they will leave this issue of membership eligibility in the hands of individual wing commanders to decide as they see fit. Well, let's pause 1 second here. Now, despite the ruling of the National Executive Board concerning the membership eligibility of African Americans, several wings in CAP from their inception in late 41 had embraced and propagated diversity within their ranks. So we have 3 photographs here. Okay, so let's start left to right. On the left, you have the Illinois wing. In the middle, you have the National Capital Wing. On the right, you have the New York wing. I already told you about the 111 Flight Squadron in Chicago, set up by Cornelius Coffey and Willa Brown. And you can see here, Illinois wing cadets at encampment. You have male cadets, black and white, eating, training, serving together without incident. In the middle, you have the National Capital Wing's drill team, made up of white and black Americans. This wing had an integrated cadet program from its inception in March of 1943, before there even was a National Capital Wing. This integrated drill team was extremely competitive at the Middle East region competition, and it frequently represented the region at the national drill competition. On the right, the New York wing probably had some of the greatest diversity of any wing in the country. You have African Americans, Puerto Ricans, immigrant children from across the world who are coming to the United States seeking a better life. All of these young men and women are joining and excelling in CAP to be better citizens serving their communities. But if the issue of membership is left up to individual wing commanders, you can have an uneven application of policy. And there will be problems. And unfortunately, some wings will decide to take matters to the extreme. And eventually it's going to get noticed. Now, in April 1957, reporters from the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, it's an African-American-owned newspaper, will begin investigating matters regarding segregation in the Maryland wing. When CAP National Headquarters learns of the news investigation, they will reach out to the then Maryland Wing Commander, Colonel A. Paul Fonda, and Fonda will admit on the record that the wing did not have any black members, but he stated that, quote, "We are making a study of establishment for an all-colored squadron. We do not plan to integrate into white groups." Colonel Fonda will also mention that he had surveyed the wing personnel, and the cadets had no objection whatsoever to integration, but most of the senior members in the wing were opposed to integration. Now, Frank Burnham, who is a public affairs officer at CAP National Headquarters, was interviewed by reporters from the Baltimore Afro-American. He will acknowledge that the adjacent National Capital Wing was integrated. It had its all-integrated drill team, and they did have some all-white and all-black squadrons, but this was predominantly due to the geographic location of the units within the district, essentially neighborhood-based squadrons. But Burnham also explains that racial discrimination in CAP is, quote, "against national policy, and CAP is too important a program to become involved with the problems of segregation. Thus, there is a policy of non-discrimination for Civil Air Patrol. The truth of the matter is, there was no such policy. Burnham is incorrect here. Now, the Air Force, upon learning about the situation in the press, will decide to issue a memorandum of record on April 23rd, and they're going to try and better explain the relationship between CAP and the Air Force. They will recognize that the Air Force has no real authority to exercise control or establish any policy over CAP. Again, we're a nonprofit independent corporation. And the Air Force certainly has no control regarding membership. And the Air Force acknowledges publicly that the CAP National Board, quote, does not have a policy of discrimination so far as membership is concerned. However, local commanders are permitted the latitude of determining who will be accepted as a member in CAP. In certain states where segregation is still an unsolved problem, and think predominantly here we're talking about southern states or those states with what we call Jim Crow laws, that, quote, distinction in membership is possibly practice. And this is a poetic way of saying there is discrimination happening in CAP. Now, the 4 May 1957 issue of the Baltimore Afro-American will have not one but 2 stories about how African Americans in Maryland had attempted to join CAP but were denied membership. The first details how 3 high school freshmen, seen here on the right, James Watson, Van Webb, and Victor Cole, had attempted to join the Maryland wing at the Friendship International Airport, but were told, quote, we don't accept colored cadets. A second story talked about how from June to December of '56, Reverend Julius Carroll, an associate pastor of the Sharp Street Methodist Church there in Baltimore, still there today, also a licensed pilot with over 1,500 flight hours, had attempted to transfer into the Maryland wing after serving in the Tuskegee Squadron of Alabama wing, which was integrated. The Maryland wing essentially would not process the transfer. They held the Reverend's 201, his personnel file, and essentially they gave him a bureaucratic runaround until his membership lapsed in CAP. Now, a little postscript for perspective, that I've found some information on 2 of these 3 young men. Victor Cole would actually serve 3 years in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and end up being honorably discharged. He would later go on to earn his bachelor's in business management from Johns Hopkins University, and he became a supervisor at Western Electric. James Watson would attend Morgan State University. He would commission via Army ROTC as a second lieutenant in the infantry. On 4 December 1965, he would be killed in action in South Vietnam as a member of B Company, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Infantry Regiment. And his name you can visit on the wall in Washington. Now, although these men had been denied the ability to serve in Civil Air Patrol because of their race, they were not denied the ability to serve their country. Now, at this point, the matter reaches to the highest levels of the Air Force. Air Force Chief of Staff General Nathan Twinning's Air Staff will prepare a position paper regarding the Air Force support for CAP, which was now starting to come into question because of the segregation practices, which go in contrast to the Air Force. The Air Force, we have to remember, has been integrated for practically a decade. Within the findings of the Air Staff's papers, the authors will note, quote, it is obvious that in some states the membership of CAP would be adversely affected if the Civil Air Patrol were forced into an integration policy. It is evident that members of the white race would abstain from joining colored units. Now, the paper's authors will also recognize that CAP is greatly dependent on the Air Force for logistical and financial support. And if this support was removed because of the issue of segregation, they believe CAP would potentially collapse as a result. Now, some of the recommended Air Staff positions, which you can see here, clipped out of the original document, will note that the Air Force is not in favor of segregation, but it's also not necessarily going to withdraw its support from CAP. But what is really valuable here to note is that the Air Force said, quote, CAP should be encouraged to initiate a program within each state that will tend to influence public opinion favoring integration of membership in CAP units. Now, as an auxiliary of the Air Force, the tarnish and disgrace on the CAP brand invariably will rub off on that of the U.S. Air Force. The membership, then, of an indirect nature, the mentorship, albeit of an indirect nature, about integration would be further articulated by the Air Force in the weeks to come. Kind of a soft hand approach to the issue. Now, on May 11th, the Baltimore Afro-American will publish another story about another potential senior member and licensed pilot, Howard Wims, who was denied admission into the Maryland wing. The same article will note that a member of the National Capital Wing will attempt to help him set up a senior squadron in Adamstown, Maryland, although I don't know if this squadron ever came into existence. Now, the stakes will rise even higher on a very public national level on May 15th when Louis Laterre of the National Negro Press Association will ask President Eisenhower during his news conference at the White House the following question, quote, "Would you comment on the extent to which the Civil Air Patrol program is open to all the people without discrimination, and, as an auxiliary of the Air Force, do you think it should seek recruits from all segments of the population?" This remains the only time CAP has ever been mentioned at a White House press conference. And President Eisenhower offers a rather fascinating reply, and I have his full reply here before you. He'll note that his first contact with CAP goes back to its beginnings, when he was an operations officer at the War Department. And in fact, then Major General Eisenhower did influence and shape to an extent the Coastal Patrol program in its very early days. President Eisenhower understandably speaks well of CAP, and in the last part, which I have highlighted here, he begins to show his opinions with regard to the actual civil rights movement in the country. And he states, quote, "I believe that we hurt ourselves when, in military organizations, we try to discriminate among Americans in recruiting them. I believe that just as a matter of efficiency, it is better to use those that are capable of doing things strictly on merit and without such things as we are talking about, and in this case, discrimination." President Eisenhower's comments will be picked up in the news media, but they do not result in any major shift in CAP's lack of anti-discrimination policies. The bigger issue is that he spoke out about civil rights for the first time in months. Oh, by the way, something is going to happen in Little Rock, Arkansas in a couple months after this statement that will bring the civil rights movement front and center to many Americans. Now, after President Eisenhower's comments, the matters will calm down for the next few weeks until on June 5th, when Brigadier General Cecil Combs will reach out to Major General Walter Agee, who's CAP's national commander, and he'll share the Air Staff report of May 7th from General Twinnings. Combs will note that those Air Force personnel who participate as region or wing liaison officers must comply with the Air Force's policy that there will be no discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin. But he'll point out that, quote, "If their advice or consideration is requested in connection with CAP policies, the traditional Air Force policy in this respect should be clearly stated, and every influence should be exerted to see to it that these principles, and we can say in a contemporary sense, these core values, are followed within units of the Civil Air Patrol." This is what I'm talking about, an indirect, soft mentorship approach for how the Air Force is going to encourage CAP to integrate and move forward with contemporary attitudes towards these issues of non-discrimination, and that, to this time, CAP has been reluctant to directly address. Now, after all the turmoil of events in 1957, there's a bit of a lull in the news coverage of Civil Air Patrol regarding segregation and discrimination. Now, there is a really positive news story which will emerge beginning in October and November of 1958, talking about one James E. Spruill of West Philadelphia. Spruill, who you can see in the photographs here on the left and right, had joined the Franklin Institute Air Squadron of the Pennsylvania Wing, becoming the first completely blind cadet in Civil Air Patrol history. Now, Spruill had become interested in aviation after reading Arthur C. Clarke's 1957 book, Going into Space, albeit in Braille, and he had all of his CAP manuals and materials translated into Braille. His fellow squadron mates would actually help conduct drill with him, and they developed a method to kind of steer him in formation. He also partook in an orientation flight, and Spruill was able to handle the aircraft with relative ease, and he could maintain and physically sense level flight, so true seat of the pants flying. Spruill's story will be featured in Jet Magazine, the CAP Times, as well as other national newspapers. When the governor of Pennsylvania will learn about Spruill, he'll even pen him a personal letter congratulating him on joining CAP and wishing him well. The article in Jet Magazine, I believe, is probably the first time CAP was ever mentioned in this African-American publication. Fast forward a few years. Shortly into the presidency of John F. Kennedy, the White House will receive a complaint on March 26, 1961, regarding the upcoming mid-April Middle East Region Conference, which was slated to be held in Columbia, South Carolina. I don't know who the source of the complaint is, and I couldn't find any documentation about it, but what we do know is that it alleged that black Civil Air Patrol members would be, quote, intimidated against if they attended this conference. Now, the White House routed the message to Air Force Chief of Staff General Thomas D. White. General White, in turn, requested a memorandum on the Civil Air Patrol Air Force relationships, as well as CAP's policy on segregation within a day. And it was specifically his desire to keep CAP, quote, from being a pawn to try and solve this issue of integration in the country. 2 days later, Major General Robert Eaton, Assisting Chief of Staff for Reserve Forces, will send General White the requested memorandum. 2 key points to note, which I kind of have here. As the conference was slated to be in Columbia, South Carolina, the Air Force was informed that due to South Carolina's local and state Jim Crow laws, African American members who planned to attend the conference would be barred from staying in the same hotels as the fellow white CAP participants, and they would also most likely be barred from using any of the same restaurants or other facilities as the white attendees. But General Eaton noted that the Secretary of the Air Force did have the legal authority to host the conference at nearby Shaw Air Force Base, and apparently the base commander was informed and fully authorized and even requested to provide maximum accommodations and facility support to the Middle East Region Conference while convened on his base. But about that, the following day, the South Carolina Wing Commander, Colonel John Taylor, will turn down this offer by the Air Force and Shaw to host the conference. His explanation is that while it's about 40 miles from Columbia to Shaw, the wing had invited about 40 to 50 VIPs, and in Taylor's words, quote, these were mostly politicians, and if word got out that it was moved for this reason, they would not come. Not attending would be less a matter than a potential government relations issue, not just for South Carolina wing, but CAP writ large. The decision is then made by the Middle East Region Commander, Colonel Stanhope Linbury, to just postpone his conference. Essentially, it's canceled. And yet, ironically, the following year, they hold it in Baltimore, Maryland, a city with considerable racial problems then and now, not to mention its segregated all-white wing. Now, approximately 2 weeks later, Lieutenant Colonel M.R. Walsh, Office of the Assistant Chief of Staff for Reserve Forces, sends what I consider a remarkable letter to Brigadier General Stephen McElroy, who's CAP's national commander. Also note the fact that CAP went from a major general to a brigadier general, then they're going to go to a colonel in command. There's 2 key portions of the letter I marked here. Quote, as a result of the President's recent statements concerning segregation within governmental agencies and firms having contracts with the federal government, there has been a new wave of inquiries into the status of CAP. Continued Walsh. I was most forcibly informed by some people in quite high positions that if CAP wants to continue to receive support from the Air Force as it does now, the CAP leaders had better do some thorough soul searching and align their sights with the Air Force concerning segregation. The thinking is that it will be contrary to the President's policy for the Air Force to continue supporting CAP if that organization now is and continues to be segregated. Walsh recommends, further on as you see here, that the subject be entered on the agenda for the 1961 CAP National Board. The subject was not entered on the agenda. So 1961 National Board will take no action. And the following year, in 1962, the National Board will meet in Houston, Texas, and engage in extensive revisions of the Constitution and the bylaws, but the language concerning membership will not change, nor is there any discussion regarding discrimination policy or segregation. Now, a week after the board meeting, Colonel William Patterson, the Maryland Wing Commander, will admit to the reporters of the Baltimore Afro-American that the wing remains all white, though he will say he is working with the Baltimore Board of Education to establish squadrons in city schools. And a postscript that is important to note here, Colonel Patterson will be successful in integrating the Maryland wing during his tenure as wing commander. Now, 2 weeks after President Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas, Texas, on 22 November 1963, the CAP National Executive Board will meet. And during this meeting, the board's chairman, Colonel Paul Turner, will remark that he had been asked about CAP's policy concerning discrimination. And he thought the policy was essentially the policy back from December 41, articulated by General Curry. Except then he was informed, in fact, Colonel, there is no policy. There hasn't been a policy since CAP became incorporated. Subsequently, then, the board will act, and to their credit, act swiftly, the result of which you can see here. Since the Air Force has a policy of no discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin, the CAP will align and also have a policy of no discrimination in any activity based on race, color, religion, or national origin. And several months later, half a year later, on July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson will sign a landmark piece of legislation into law, which is known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This act will outlaw discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It will require equal access to public places and employment and will enforce desegregation of schools and the right to vote. It will not end discrimination nationwide, but it will certainly open the door to further progress, and its impact continues to be felt to this day. Now, if in the Act is a section titled Title VI, quote, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs, and within this, Section 601 reads, no person in the United States shall on the grounds of race, color, or national origin be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. As a recipient of federal funding, CAP is accountable under Title VI. Oops. So later that year, President Johnson will approve Department of Defense Directive 5500.11, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. This will then be promulgated throughout the defense establishment, and the directive effectuates the provisions of Title VI. Now, moving forward into June 1965, both the General Services Administration and the Defense Supply Agency will inform CAP that since they're receiving federal property from the Defense Department for educational purposes for the cadet program, CAP has to provide assurance that the corporation is and will comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of '64. And on July 15th, Colonel Turner, still chairman of the National Executive Board, will sign assurance actually to both GSA and the Defense Supply Agency that CAP will comply with Title VI. And later that year, on October 20th, CAP issues CAP Regulation 39-1. See, this is not just about uniforms, but about non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. And this implements and directly supplements DoD Directive 5500.11. It places CAP in compliance with Title VI. By the way, this DoD regulation and directive, is still on the books to this day, albeit amended. This is what our Constitution of 20 February 2018 amended reads today regarding membership. Membership in Civil Air Patrol is a privilege and not a right. Qualifications and conditions for membership shall be established in the bylaws and the regulations. Discrimination based on age, disability, or the provisions of Title VI or Title VII, and Title VII concerns employment of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, is prohibited. Now we have to remember, we're one CAP and we're one total force. With regulations covering anti-discrimination in CAP, the corporation advances as the nation's premier volunteer service organization, reflecting the fabric of the entire nation. So I offer two photographs for thought, one of National Capital Wing cadets in 1980, and then one of Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Shauna Rochelle Kimbrell, formerly of the Colorado cadet of the Colorado Wing, graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and the nation's first female African-American fighter pilot. Every day in Civil Air Patrol, we are making our future leaders in both the military as well as society and civil government through non-discrimination. Through inclusivity, we're ensuring greater inclusivity in the total force as well as in the nation. We benefit from non-discrimination policies, and we will advance further because we have them, we understand them, and most importantly, we utilize them. So in conclusion, CAP's journey to a policy of non-discrimination for our membership largely mirrored American society. The combined efforts of the United States Air Force and the broader civil rights movement will prove the catalysts for greater inclusivity in the corporation. We need to remember that CAP is dedicated today to enriching an organizational culture built on inclusion of and appreciation for all diverse populations in our country. Inclusivity and diversity strengthen CAP's connections with our community, whether that be local, state, or national. the total force of active Guard Reserve civilian auxiliary, and most important of all, it strengthens CAP's connections with the Armed Forces of the United States, which is a diverse and inclusive organization defending our freedom from enemies at home and abroad. Thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Hopefully I can get the screen back here. You should be able to see me now. We good? So if anyone has any questions, just feel free to chime right in.
So, Colonel Blazich, we have a question from Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Feliciano. I have not seen any racial discrimination. However, as a female pilot in areas outside of West Virginia wing, I have seen a lot of bias against females, especially as pilots. What is being done to change that hidden bias?
An excellent question that, admittedly, as national historian, I don't have a good answer to. What I can provide is that discrimination against females, be it pilot or other, has been an issue historically in Civil Air Patrol. A good example of this was the Chaplain Corps did not even open up to allow female chaplains till about 1968 or 1969. I think it might be 69. And in fact, in the 1950s, there were efforts to allow female members to be chaplains, and they were voted down at the National Board. There was also an effort around the same time to get female cadets eligible to participate in IACE, in the International Air Cadet Exchange. And that was also voted down, and female cadets weren't allowed to participate in IACE until I think it's about the mid to late 1960s. I bring all this up because we're unaware. We like to say there's no bias, there's no discrimination, but there is. Many of us have experienced it, have lived through it. Using the history to understand how we got from A to B and trying to understand, is there a policy or not a policy? And I hope this talk demonstrated that we never had the policy in place. We assumed, but we never checked. Trust but verify, as I say. Knowing that you've experienced this bias or you've seen it, the best recommendation I can tell you is Colonel Chazelle is your wing diversity officer. Bring this document and bring the issues before Colonel Chazelle so he can also route the information up to national headquarters. If policies need to be made, provide the evidence, provide this information so we have it, so we can make an effort to affect change. Ultimately, diversity is not an issue of one person. It's not the element of the National Diversity Officer or the Wing Diversity Officer or the Squadron Diversity Officer. It's really up to all of us to make a concerted effort to increase the diversity in our organization. Race, class, gender, sex, intellectual, disability, every component. The more, and I hope some of the examples I offered, you can show, look at the people we lost, who we could have had as members, or we had as members, and they left because of discrimination, and they took their talents elsewhere, and they benefited American society. But unfortunately, we didn't have them as part of our organization to help benefit us and improve CAP and improve their squadron and improve their wing. So I know that's not a direct answer, and I apologize, but I hope there's some perspective there that maybe is useful.
So another question is very little effort regarding diversity recruitment in my area. Hard to see where it falls amongst the priorities of a squadron.
In that regard, as I get on my soapbox again, diversity is something that all of us can make a concerted effort to address. All of us can do something about it. In the case as national historian, if I'm going to talk about diversity, I'd like to back up my words of actions. So the National History Program staff, we now have 4 women. I have 2 Puerto Ricans. I've added the first African-American member ever on the National History Program staff. And I'm hoping to bring in more individuals into CAP, into the National History Program, to tell the stories that, quite frankly, have not been looked at. The 111th Flight Squadron is an incredible civil rights milestone for the country. And we should be proud of the fact that it began in CAP. But unfortunately, due to the discrimination at the time, which was still, unfortunately, overtly there, the CAP National Headquarters never publicized this. It was an achievement that was only covered by the African American press and completely, pardon the phrase, whitewashed from CAP. And that's sort of why it was lost to record for so many years. I came across it during the research for the Congressional Gold Medal and the 75th anniversary. And I'm hoping to get up to Illinois whenever COVID allows so that I can research up there and try and flesh out that story and bring a little more detail to bear. How did it happen? Here's an important thing. Effort regarding diversity. It largely happened because Coffey and Brown worked with their state legislators and approached their state legislators to go to the governor to kind of put the political leverage, if you will, to be able to make this possible. Why? Because the wing commander at the time was a known racist, and his own flesh and blood relatives have told me this. But they said he appreciated merit, and he respected talent, and he respected Coffey and Brown as aviators. And for that reason, he was willing to give it a shot, so to speak. And it's proven to be very successful. The most diverse wings in CAP today have had a long history of integration and diversity. That's not to say other wings can't have it, but it takes effort to foster it, to sustain it, and to grow it. And so the more each and every one of us makes a concerted effort to increase diversity in CAP, to increase the inclusion, as well as call out issues of discrimination or policy, as Sandra did here, the more that we have that, the more that we're going to be able to improve not just our local unit, but the corporation as a whole.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Yeah, you can type them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
And I understand too, if some of these things are not the most comfortable topics to talk about. So I'm going to put, there's my CAP email. Anyone is welcome to talk to me. And I'll even give you, here's my cell phone. So if you don't feel comfortable putting something in writing and you'd like to talk to me, feel free. Because I'm still actively researching this. This talk essentially is the first time ever that we've really looked into the historical record of discrimination and segregation, if you will, in CAP. And what we have at the Moore Center is but a fraction of what likely exists out there. But it's going to take effort to piece the story together. And if we know our past, we can help shape our future. There's more soapbox talk. Sorry.
Well, Colonel Blazich, on behalf of the West Virginia Wing Commander, Colonel Connie Moody, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today at our wing conference and to present this, what I believe to be very fascinating history of CAP, and hopefully that we can all use its lessons and to inform our future efforts with regard to diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Colonel Chazelle and West Virginia Wing. Thank you all for having me here today. As I said, please feel free to reach out to me. The more that, and I'm going to make fun of Colonel Chazelle here for a second. Not make fun of, I'm going to salute Colonel Chazelle in a polite, friendly fashion. I became national historian back in April of 2013. And what I knew, I maybe knew this much about CAP. And diversity and inclusion was not something that I really gave second thought to. And I'm a white man. I'm a white, Southern-born man, educated, and I went to schools in North Carolina, I did my doctorate in Ohio. But I didn't think about diversity. I was aware of historically, right, the civil rights movement, of these other matters. I grew up with it. But I never really put any concerted effort into it, and certainly didn't think much about it in CAP. Since we've created our National Diversity Officer, and I've worked with the National Diversity Officer, it has been an eye-opening growth for myself to understand what we can do, what we've been, where we need to go. And every single day I keep learning more about history, and it's thanks to Colonel Giselle to kind of keep me on the straight and level when I first became national historian as a very junior CAP member to kind of get where I am today. And thank you, Colonel Giselle, for your mentorship and guidance. But that's just it. Mentorship and guidance. Mentorship is tremendous when it comes to diversity, to work with individuals, because maybe they're saying, well, wait a minute, why does this matter? Why should we care? Right? We have laws in place. We're fine. Yes, but the culture, the environment that we create, is it inviting or not inviting? If, for example, you see a graphic on the web for a conference and every single face in that graphic looks the same, ask yourself, well, who's not here? Is it even this visual, even something as small as that? You could say, well, this isn't inviting to me because I don't see anyone that looks like me. I don't see anyone that speaks like me. I don't see anybody who might have mobility issues like me. So why do I want to spend my time and energy, since we do all this for a huge salary, right? We all get rich and famous in CAP. Little things like that, from public affairs, from history, from operations, all of those elements of mentorship, much as it is to in a professional environment or in academia, those little individual acts of mentorship, of education, of guidance go a tremendous way to creating and fostering an environment of inclusion that's going to bring in people and talents that we never thought possible in CAP, and which are going to help make us that much more capable of an organization, not just from a flying perspective, not just from an ES perspective, aerospace education, but just community-wise, to make us a stronger organization. Because I think we all can agree right now in the country, there's a lot of division. And the more that we can pull people together and work together, that is what will strengthen us as a country and help strengthen us as one CAP and one total force. And I'm totally soapboxing here, so you all, if you're rolling your eyes, I apologize. But I do stand by this. I do stand firmly by all of this. So
well, sir, it's
I will
been
stop
my
there.
honor and privilege to serve with you for the last 10 years almost now. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but you know, I value our friendship, and it's been my privilege to serve with you. Thank you for the outstanding efforts that you've made to move CAP's history program forward. We are light years beyond where we have been in the past, and you know, we always learn from our history, and you're making that history available to us. And I would also just like to tell everybody, you know, Colonel Blazich just wrote a book about Civil Air Patrol's coastal patrol mission during World War II. And any CAP member is eligible to get that book free of charge by sending a simple email to Air University Press, and they'll send you a copy of the book for free.
And actually, thank you for the book shout out. Now, let me see. Let me put this information in the chat for everyone curious. And so the book, by the way, what it is it talks about our coastal patrol operation, but places it in the context of why does CAP exist today, essentially. And oh, the text went black. Okay, well, if you highlight what I just posted there, all you need to do is email Air University Press at au.af.edu. Request book code B168. There's also a link. You can always download this book in perpetuity free as a PDF. But if you'd like a physical print copy, the Air Force will ship one to you absolutely free of charge. Absolutely free of charge. You can even order up to 10 books. So if you want a whole case of books to give out to your squadron or unit, you can request them absolutely free. So think of it as an early Christmas present. And if you'd like me to sign it, talk to Colonel Giselle, and I'm happy to sign them for you all as well.
Sounds great. Well, it looks like we're about out of time now. Again, Thank you, Colonel Blazich, for joining us today, and I hope everybody has a fruitful conference, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you
all.
Thank you.